Good evening. My name's David Sidwick, the Dorset Police and Crime Commissioner, and I'd like to welcome you to this meeting. It's a bit of a chilly night, so wherever you are, I hope that you're safe and snug, and I really appreciate it. Thank you for looking in. Now, one of the things I'm very keen on is getting out and about and talking to people, and ordinarily my team and I would be across Dorset talking to you, the public, on tonight's topic. Which is about the council precept and my plans around it. But because of the pandemic, unfortunately, we felt that large face-to-face meetings weren't so advisable. So instead, we've got an event online. And this evening, we're focusing on the Dorset Council area. So I'm joined by Chief Superintendent Richard Bell, who is the commander for the local policing area. And once myself and Richard have said a few words of introduction, we're going to be going straight to your questions. What we want to briefly cover is the role of the Police and Crime Commissioner, the Police and Crime Plan, and also Richard will give an operational update. And then I'll talk specifically about making every penny count for Dorset. So onward tonight. Oh, by the way, this session is being recorded and will be available later. So onward tonight's event. So firstly, what does the Police and Crime Commissioner do? What is my role? Well, very clearly, I'm the representative of the people. That's why it's an elected position. You elect a Police and Crime Commissioner, and I've got a number of things which I need to do. One of those is to set the Police and Crime Plan. Now, I'm very clear that this should be a Police and Crime Plan which fits with the needs of the people of Dorset. By setting that Police and Crime Plan, that gives a template, a strategic template, which the Chief Constable basically will be looking to pay attention to. I also hold the Chief Constable to account. I work with partners. We have a very close working relationship with the local authority. And primarily, one of the main things that I do is support victims. But we're talking tonight about money. And that's one of the main responsibilities, to ensure that we have enough money to support the police for keeping us all safe. And I'll come on to that a bit later on. So very clearly, I took what I learned when I was campaigning as a candidate, turned that into election promises. And on May the 6th, I was honoured and privileged to have been elected to become your Police and Crime Commissioner. Very clearly, we started straight away. We had a 100-day plan, which did 50 things. But also, more importantly, in tandem, we took those priorities that you said you wanted and started working up a Police and Crime Plan, which I was delighted that we launched the end of October, because that was 6 months early. It's a very clear plan, and it's absolutely the priorities that you said that you wanted. And it fits entirely with the vision to make Dorset the safest county in England and Wales. Now, what's happening currently is the Chief Constable is working up the operational response to that plan, and you'll hear more about that in the very near future. So what were the 6 priorities? Well, the first one was to cut crime and antisocial behaviour. The second was to make our policing more visible and connected and engaged with our population. That was a theme which everybody told me they needed. Then there is fighting violent crime, the drugs in our society, the hidden harms like domestic abuse and child abuse. The fourth one, which is very pertinent for tonight's meeting, is about fighting rural crime. We had a very good rural crime team. There was only 2 of them. There had been sort of not enough investment put in that area. And then there's 2 other things. One is a priority to put victims and communities first. And the last one was to make every penny count for Dorset. And we'll obviously come back to that. What I'd like to do is hand over to Richard, who basically will give you some insight in the policing, the operational policing in your area.
Thank you, David, and good evening, everybody. As you heard, my name is Richard Bell. I'm the local policing commander for Dorset. I'd like to thank David for the invitation this evening to come and speak to yourselves. And I appreciate the time you've all taken in order to join us. And I'm very much looking forward to your questions this evening. In April, the force took a very considered decision to change its operating model. And we moved from a force-wide approach to 2 local policing areas to align with our 2 local authorities. And as you've heard, so I'm the commander for Dorset, and I align with the Dorset Council area, and I have responsibility for patrol neighbourhoods and investigations within that area. The local policing area, as you can imagine, is very large, and it can be quite testing at times, stretching from Lyme Regis to Aldholt, Portland to Gillingham. It's also very diverse with different needs between the rural and the conurbation communities. We have areas of deprivation, areas of wealth, young people and older people alike, which all bring their own unique policing requirements to Dorset policing area. I am pleased to say, though, that we have an excellent working relationship with partners, including the local authority, social services, health, fire, and the Coast Guard, which enables us to address most problems collectively. And we also share priorities, and those are for antisocial behaviour, violence, with a particular focus at the moment on women and young girls, fraud, drugs, rural crime, and exploitation of young and the vulnerable. I'm also pleased to say that we do have, in the vast majority of occasions, your support, which I very much and my officers very much appreciate, and thank you for that. We do make mistakes, but I promise we will learn from your feedback. And this evening is a really important opportunity for us to get your sense of where you would like us to go. The future does offer us some opportunities with investments in rural policing, enforcement teams, neighbourhood policing, and missing. And we do need to remember that we live in a stunningly beautiful county, which is one of the safest in the country, and we are committed to keeping it safe for all. And we will be tough on crime. We will put victims first, and we will keep people safe. So thank you, and I look forward to your questions. David.
Thank you very much indeed, Richard. So now you've heard about the police delivery of the plan and the way that they're thinking. So what I'd really like to do over the next couple of minutes is just talk about the specific issue of money, particularly the precept. So one of my priorities was to make every penny count. I promised the people of Dorset to be transparent when it came to funding the police force, and I intend very much to honour that promise. Now, the way that the police force gets funded is there are 2 parts to it. One part is a national government grant based on a national funding formula. And the second part is money which is raised locally through what's called the council tax precept. Now, I am very clear that one of my jobs is to lobby for a fairer national funding formula. That is being worked on at the moment, but it will take a while to get landed. The issue we have in the interim is that we are one of the lowest funded forces from central government. The majority of the increase in that government grant this year will be focused on the delivery of the extra 20,000 officers. So it will be on our share of that 20,000. What it doesn't cover is it won't cover things like inflationary pressures. We're all living with that at the moment, and I just like to emphasize I understand, because everybody's bills are going up. So we've got the same thing. We've got the costs of recruitment, we've got the costs of training, equipment, vehicles, changes to buildings, and we've got the same thing you and I have, which is things like power going up. Such costs will have to be met, because if they're not, then unfortunately what it eventually comes down to is looking at what the numbers are for the police force. So it'll be a bit like a bath. We're filling it up, but we're also pulling the plug out. We don't want to do that. So what the government have announced this year is that PCCs are allowed to raise the precept by £10 a year. This is based on the average Band D property. So in Dorset, the majority actually won't pay the £10. It will be less. What that actually means is that's 83p a month. Now, what that allows me to do is it allows me to clearly make certain that we are able to capitalize on the uplift, It means that also we can address those inflationary pressures that we've got. But above all else, it will allow me to do things which I promised you, which you wanted, and I stood on in elections, such as strengthening the neighbourhood policing team, and putting in a new neighbourhood enforcement team to specifically prevent and fight antisocial behaviour and crime. We know we have issues around customer service and reporting, so this will also allow me to invest to transform public engagement and what's called the contact management systems. So to improve what we're doing, improve the reporting, improve the 101 and the emergency response. I'm very clear that one of the issues we have in this county is the issue of drugs. And we are going to be fighting violent crime. So the drugs and the exploitation that comes with them and the high harm areas. We'll be investing in a new county lines task force targeting organised drug supply. We'll be increasing capability in protecting and safeguarding children from other online sex predators. We're going to be using specialist resources and partnership initiatives, which Richard alluded to help protect women and girls from violence, sexual assault and drug spiking. And something particularly pertinent to this audience and also very close to my heart, we are going to fight rural crime. And we will be doing that by expanding the rural crime team to protect local communities and business owners. The Chief Constable and I have a shared ambition to do this as soon as possible and to basically make certain that this is landed well for our rural communities. Now, I'm very clear that in order to do all this, what I need is your help. I need your approval, if you like, by taking part in the consultation on the precept in order to do that. If I have that, then I truly believe that we will address those priorities and it's time for Dorset to look forward to a better, brighter future. We can drive to be the safest county and we can help make certain that we have the crime-fighting policing in our neighbourhoods that we deserve. I'm consulting on this at the moment. If you haven't done the survey, please do so. You can find it at dorsetpolicefunding.uk. But clearly, tonight is very much about your questions. So without further ado, we'll move to that and we'll answer as many questions as possible. Those that we don't get to, we'll answer afterwards. All right, thank you very much indeed.
Okay, so we got the first question here, David. When are Dorset Police going to stop aiding and abetting fox hunting and stop them breaking the law? So, Jules, thanks very much for the question. It is an incredibly emotive subject, and I appreciate that there are differences of views and opinions. We will respond to all allegations of crime when received. We won't monitor every single hunt. It's impossible. It's probably inappropriate as well. But where an allegation of crime is made, we will respond accordingly. We will take action where necessary. And you can have the reassurance that the rural crime team do engage with hunts on a regular basis and do take appropriate action, as well as the neighbourhood policing teams in particular around North Dorset. So if there is illegal activity, we will take appropriate action.
And I'm very clear, absolutely clear, that we're increasing the rural crime team. And part of that is about wildlife crime. Fox hunting is illegal, and we will intervene and prosecute where necessary.
So I've got a second question here is, I hear there has been a lot of antisocial behaviour in the Littlemore area. What is happening to tackle that? So
if I go first from a strategic end and then pass to you for the specific operational end on that one. So strategically, you heard that the first priority was to cut crime and antisocial behaviour. What we've done, which is new to my term of office, is Dorset Police now have a clear priority about antisocial behaviour called Operation Relentless. That's very much in train. The other thing connected with that is I put in place a Operation Relentless community grant system. which allows communities or groups to actually ask for money between £100 and £5,000 with a specific plan that they've got to address antisocial behaviour in their areas. So that's the overall picture. But you have a specific question about a geography, and obviously Richard will be able to give you the answer about what's going on there now.
Yeah, no, so thank you. And I do appreciate the little more has been in the press over the last couple of weeks. Some of that publicity has actually been driven by ourselves with some of the activity we've undertaken. There were a group of youths that were causing a nuisance to local shopkeepers and local residents. Some of those youths have been invited in for an interview by police. We are working with social services in order to divert them away from antisocial behaviour, criminal behaviour, and try to find them alternative diversionary activity to support them. One of the individuals in question has actually been moved out of the area, and we have increased our patrols within that area to take enforcement action where necessary. The local councillor, Mr. O'Leary, has been contacted, and we are also looking at actually what are the youth provisions there, what other social clubs activities can engage young people to divert them away from causing a nuisance. So there is an awful lot of activity within that area, and it's being led by Inspector Dave Parr, who's the local neighbourhood inspector.
And I've been keeping close to it and talking to Louis O'Leary as well, because I saw the concern, I think it was in the Echo, which came forward. So I hope that answers that question.
So, David, what are you doing to help prevent rural crime? Have you done anything to improve the control room? Very long waiting times recently, and nothing seems to change. And that's from Tom Bolchin.
Well, thanks, Tom. I alluded earlier to the very good rural crime team, which we have, and which you were part of for a time. So, to prevent rural crime, what we're doing is, as I said, we are significantly increasing that rural crime team. We are making the connection better with the neighbourhood policing team, so there is more joined up working. We also have a rural crime reduction board coming into being within the next couple of months, and that will coordinate and drive other activities in the rural area. I was very clear that I wanted to bring in something called Country Watch, so to increase things like Neighbourhood Watch, things like Community Speed Watch, but also to put something else in place. I'm being deliberately vague because we're working through the detail during January, but I want to bring in something which I'm terming a parish watchman. So even if you have a small village, you won't be able to sustain a neighbourhood watch as such. There is still somebody responsible who links in with the neighbourhood policing team. I'm very interested in how we get that off the ground. So there's a few things that we're working on. Regarding the control room, you will know that has been a frustration and continues to be a frustration. We have to do a number of things. We have to make certain that people are given the information on how to report consistently in the first place. I've been in a residents' meeting, and somebody a police officer has said, if you report, phone 101 or phone 999. I have been in a residents' meeting with another police officer who talks through use Ask Ned, which is the non-emergency directory, email or go online 101 in order to make a report, phone 101 after that, and with 999, that's for a crime in action, it's for an emergency, it's for an offender still being around. So a much more comprehensive delivery of what we need to do. So one issue is consistency. We've got to get consistency and message right. And why is this so important? Because a significant proportion of the calls into the control room are about non-police activity. We've had calls even to 999 along the lines of, this is an emergency. I'm locked out of my flat. What do I do? That's a locksmith. We've had, this is an emergency. My boyfriend's broken up with me. Every time we get calls like that, then what happens is it takes up the call lines for other things. So we've got to get a consistent message out. We've also got to get consistent about what comes to the police and what comes to the local authority. For example, antisocial behaviour. If it's noise, that should go to the local authority. But 50% of people think it should be the police. And we've got other things where it's vice versa. So we've got to get consistency right. We've got to get communication right. And we've got to invest in it. So that was one of the things that I was talking about earlier. We've actually got to look at it and say, is there a better way of doing this? Are there technological solutions? Are there reorganizational solutions? And I've sat with the chief officer team for 4 hours going through communication, engagement, and what I call customer service. And this is a part of that. So I'm very clear that that is one of the things we've got to fix. And that was one of the things I talked about that I needed the precept for. Richard, sorry, I kind of hogged that. Do you want to add?
No, that's quite right, David. Thank you. So, just in response to the rural crime piece, Tom, yes, we do need to make improvements in rural crime, and we are committed to doing that. David's already indicated that we will be increasing the size of the rural crime team, which has specialist knowledge to be able to deal with some of the complex crimes which happen within our rural communities. But I'm also committed to increasing the neighbourhood policing teams within those rural communities as well. Particularly those towns and rural communities which are further away from our patrol hubs and therefore might not see the police officer presence that they would like. So they get that visible, familiar and accessible policing presence which they deserve. And that will come over the next year. The rural crime team will come much sooner, but through Uplift, which is the national policing increase of the 20,000 officers, I'll be prioritising the increase in neighbourhood policing teams for the Dorset policing area. Thank you. So another one, David, then. So from Colin Simpson, could we increase the presence of policing and support to the homeless and drug issues within the town centre to make the place more welcoming to tourists and residents?
Yes, absolutely. So I've talked about the uplift. I was very clear when I came into office that this year we've had 52 officers. So the actual uplift is 50, and we've managed to squeeze another 2 into the equation. I was very clear that they should go into our communities, into our neighbourhoods, and exactly the sort of place you've just talked about. And 44 out of the 50 will be doing that across Dorset. So we've got that, but your question is very much wider around support and the issue of drugs. So to me, there are 4 things we need to do. We need to be tough in our enforcement around drugs. I'm talking particularly on drug dealers, and indeed also on those who are taking drugs and being antisocial to other people. But you can't just do it with that on its own. You've got to have effective rehabilitation. And that is something you're going to hear much more about going forward. There is a push both nationally with something called the 10-year drug strategy, which came out just before Christmas. And that was allocating extra funding, particularly for effective rehabilitation. On top of that, one of the things that I do is I'm joint lead of a national portfolio on addiction and substance misuse. Something we will be doing is asking PCCs to audit what is the rehabilitation occurring in their area, what is effective, what works. Because the point is we want to invest in what actually works, and disinvest or try and stop rehabilitation which does nothing. We've got to help these people. We've got to do more, actually. We've got to have impactful education around drugs as a total. So not just heroin and cocaine, we talk about everything. We need that education. We need it particularly for our young people. And we need it changed. So it is not about here are all the drugs, don't do it, you'll get in trouble. Because usually you're talking to teenagers, and telling teenagers not to do something doesn't have a hugely wildly brilliant success rate in my experience. What you've got to do is you've got to talk about risk. You've got to talk about the fact that with MDMA, we've had another inquest this week of a young girl who took MDMA and died. That's 3 in the last 3 years that I'm aware of. So MDMA, we've got to talk about that risk of death. With something called ketamine, people who are addicted to ketamine, basically you will rot the urethra and the bladder area. And we've got a couple of kids rolling around our county who in their 20s who don't have bladders anymore. Can you imagine what their actual life is like because of that? The restriction now of their potential because of it. And we've got to talk about cannabis in a different way. Now that we are beginning to see population studies from the United States and other areas, we're beginning to see a much closer correlation to cancer and birth defects and premature aging. So we need to talk to our kids about the risks of these things. And finally, as communities, we need to say, you know what? Actually, we don't like this. The other thing that is being done is the PCCs across the Southwest have a strategic vision, and for the first time have a joint priority, and that is to make the Southwest a hostile environment for drug dealers and those who are antisocial drug takers. So I'm very clear. The message to the drug dealers is don't come to Dorset. We're intent on taking your money, taking your stuff, and taking your liberty. And we'll support the people who need the support. I, for example, over Christmas actually put some money in to help the homeless in Weymouth. So it's a balance between the two things. And I'm very pleased the 10-year drug strategy actually talks about both sides of the equation. Sorry, you pushed a hot button with me. Richard.
That's right, David. Thank you. So, because you said town, I'm not sure which town you're referring to, but I'm going to presume that you're talking predominantly about Weymouth.
Yeah.
We have Operation Luscombe, which is a multi-agency response to rough sleepers and vagrancy. The government did provide some direct funding in order to support us move people from the streets into suitable accommodation. Much of that was in B&B accommodation, but some of that was in temporary accommodation at the bottom end of the Esplanade. That is, as I've said, being led by the local authority with our support. Some individuals who were attracted to the area for no reason other than they wanted to either buy or deal drugs, and David's talked about our approach there, have been sent away from the area as they will not be accommodated. So it's very much a local support service to support those who are in need and on our streets, and to support them as well moving into treatment, benefits, education and long-term support, so that actually we can help them return to settled accommodation and hopefully a safer environment. Thank you. So David, next one. Why in Swanage are we paying higher council tax, but our services are being taken away, e.g. police and ambulance?
Okay, well, I can't speak for the ambulance and I can't speak for services generally because I'm not going to know that. I can talk about the police, and actually it's moving in the other direction. As you heard, with the uplift and the way we're doing it, what we're doing is increasing the neighbourhood policing team. So you should in Swanage see an increased visibility of our police. Now, you may not have seen that yet, and the reason is it takes 36 weeks to train an officer from being recruited on day one to actually being out there on the street. And we're just about getting to that stage now. So what I'm saying is you will see a difference. We are putting in the investment. You will see increasing police, and that should be across Dorset and including Swanage.
And again, to support that, David, so the Purbex was previously policed under Paul, under the previous operating model. That was the policing base which we had. It's now come within the Dorset local policing area. We have a patrol base at Wareham, which we are maintaining and which we are making sure that the officers are there on a daily basis for all shifts in order to service the needs of the Purbeck. We will be reinvesting in the Purbeck neighbourhood policing team. As we said, that's one of the rural communities which we most definitely need to support going forward. So hopefully you will see an increased presence and increased visibility. And I would have hoped over the summer you would have seen that anyway, because Purbex was one of the areas we did prioritise for our summer policing plan in order to support the visitor numbers at Durdle Door and Lulworth. So we did prioritise some visibility over the summer period, but I appreciate we also need to do that during the autumn and the winter. And hopefully as we move forward, you'll see a greater presence. So another question there from Thomas Anderson. Please, can I ask if the force is going to be getting more PCSOs? We used to know them. They are the heart of our local community, but we keep losing them and they're not getting replaced. Do you want me to go first for that one, David?
You go first with that one, and then
Okay.
I'll wade in afterwards.
So we are very successful in turning our PCSOs into police officers. They come with a fantastic local knowledge, and therefore we want to retain that and develop them. And a natural progression for them, or for the vast majority of them, is to move into the police service. So we don't lose them, and we don't lose their skills and their knowledge. So please be reassured in relation to that. We've also just undertaken a new recruitment of PCSOs, so we are maintaining our PCSO numbers, and the new intake, I think, starts in February. There will be a short training period, and then they will come out to our neighbourhood policing teams. So we are maintaining our PCSO numbers going forward. And everywhere I go, I do agree. I hear that the PCSO is the familiar presence within your local communities. It's that reliable person to speak to, and I have got no intention of withdrawing them from that role. They are a significant asset to the neighbourhood policing teams. So thank you.
There isn't a lot for me to add to that. I was going to talk about the February recruitment. I was going to talk about the commitment to PCSOs we have. I think I'll just give one little analogy of something else that I'm trying to fix in connection with PCSOs. I mean, the whole idea is that they are out and about in their community. And I met a long-standing one as a candidate, and she very clearly said to me the job had changed, so she was doing more admin than she ever had before. That's something I'm trying to address and clear out. So not only will we retain our commitment to PCSOs, they should be able to be back out in the communities more than they have been recently.
So a question from Alex, exactly how many additional officers will the precept uplift lead to?
So if it goes right, and I see no reason why it shouldn't, and we can recruit, we have 50 in the first year, I think it's 60 in the second year and 50 in the third year. Remember, this is true additionality. This is not saying that we're replacing retired officers. That's going on in addition. And both the Chief Constable and myself, a bit like this last year, we've got a shared ambition to try and go above the uplift number. You know, we managed to squeeze out another 2 out of the money we had this year. We'll be seeing what we can do. Last year, we'll be seeing what we can do this year in the same way. Now, I am very, very clear that this is great. I'm also clear that we could always do with a bit more, which is why I am lobbying extensively around the national funding formula, for example.
I think David, have you frozen there? Or so
Sorry?
if I can continue the answer then. So in relation to the increase in officer, the other thing that we're looking to do is equip our officers in a slightly different way. So some of the investment that we'll be looking at will be in drone technology to support our missing persons team, but also our rural crime team to be able to survey large areas, detect crime and prevent crime. We'll also be looking at some infrared cameras and some nighttime scopes, again, in order to detect criminality in the evening. So not all of our money is spent on officers, but I do agree that the vast majority of actually the police budget is spent on officer numbers and staffing. So next question then is from a Philip Levine. What is being done to tackle builders' vans being broken into? I live in Westbourne, but I know it affects the whole of Dorset.
So from the strategic level, the uplift, the extra resources, the different way that we are engaging, the more visibility of patrols on the streets, that should all help with that. but I know that we have specific operations around that as well. So I'm going to pass across to Richard.
Yeah, no, so thank you. So Westbourne's obviously BCP, but we do have theft from vehicles and theft of vehicles across the my local policing area. The most prolific offence of recent was the catalytic converter thefts. We worked with industry in order to identify which vehicles were going to be targeted. We supplied some smart water in order to detect offenders when crimes were committed. And again, we also looked to educate the owners of those vehicles in order to take precautions to prevent the thefts. Theft from motor vehicles are not as prolific in the county as they are in the conurbation. But again, the prevention advice we would provide is we are still seeing too many owners of vehicles leaving them insecure or property on display. So please, if I could ask that you make sure that all your personal items are removed and out of sight, and that your vehicle's locked. In specific to the targeting of workman vans or builder vans or vehicles which may have electrical goods, we will follow the intelligence. So every single crime and incident is mapped onto for the local neighbourhood policing teams. We can identify areas of concern. We can try to target harden those. We can provide engagement and advice, and we can provide additional patrols. So I would say is please do, however frustrating it may be, report your crime and incident to us, because it does help us smartly target our resources accordingly. So Ryan from Weymouth. Weymouth residents have suffered and felt extremely intimidated by street drinking in areas such as the harbour, the seafront areas, both covered by the existing PSPO, however not enforced. This is having an impact on local business as residents are not wanting to visit these areas. What will Dorset Police do to enforce the PSPO in these areas and any areas that they may be covered in? The review to benefit the residents and the businesses of Weymouth.
So when I became Police and Crime Commissioner, I visited what was agreed to be the top 4 ASB hotspots in Dorset, one of which was the Esplanade at Weymouth and the Harbour. So I'm acutely aware of the issues that we've got. We will have those extra resources which will help with that, but you have a very specific question around the PSPO. Just before we go there, let me say something else. We've just brought to Dorset, we've just started something which is basically sobriety tagging. So these are individuals who are basically, they are not quite alcoholics, but they binge drink. They cause antisocial behavior. And if they are prosecuted, one of the options that judges now have is to put them on to be tagged, which monitors their alcohol levels. That helps them as an individual, but it also helps the police and stops reoffending. And that's a move I'm very basically endorsing of, and we'll see how that pans out in the future. Richard, the specifics on the PSPO, please, sir.
Yeah, so it's been an incredibly challenging year this year with COVID and restrictions and easing of restrictions. And I know that's exacerbated some of the issues within the Weymouth area. We know, for instance, that the entry into buildings was restricted, which affected access to toilets. We talked about the access, therefore, to public toilets and whether or not we could have mobile toilets to prevent urination in the street. Additional bin collections in order to prevent waste building up. And some areas were pedestrianised, which became natural gathering areas. The police have a number of powers. We don't just rely on the PSPO. So we have dispersal orders, and we do use those frequently to send somebody away from an area. The PSPO is led by the local authority, and we're in constant contact with them about how we can, in partnership, provide a safe environment for everybody to socialise. And that will include the deployment of CSAS, which is Community Safety Accredited staff, which are employed by the local authority. They have powers in order to execute the PSPO, as well as providing additional security if needs be, and that was delivered over the summer as well. So there's a whole raft of actions which we can take as a partnership, as opposed to just relying on the PSPO. And I hope you note as well that the recent press article around actors and the closure of it shows that police will take positive action and enforcement where absolutely necessary to ensure that we are tough on crime and prevent any unnecessary impact on local residents and businesses, so that it improves the local community and the local area.
And lastly, from the point of view of planning for this summer, what I do is I have regular meetings with the local authorities and also the chair of the Community Safety Partnership. And we specifically will be sitting down and making certain that we have even closer partnership working for this summer, and considering issues like antisocial behaviour on the harbour in Weymouth. So I hope that gives some reassurance.
So a question from Christine, when are you going to do something about the amount of weed that is openly being smoked on the streets? I object to it being wafted up mine or my grandchild's nose. Get that sorted. Too much of it is going on. If you wish to smoke a joint, go somewhere where you don't inflict it on others.
Absolutely right. Couldn't agree with that more fully. Up until me taking office, I'm not certain when the last time you heard a PCC here say he was going to be tough on drugs. I'm going to be tough on drugs. The Chief Constable is going to be tough on drugs, and that includes cannabis. We are going to make certain that this gets better. It's a long, hard haul, but we're going to basically address it. One of the issues is we've got to change the perception of our young people around this drug. For years, there's been this coolness around it. There's been this sly wink around it. Oh, it's only a bit of weed. It's a bit of pot. Well, that bit of weed or that bit of pot will basically cause you immense difficulties down the line with your life. As I say, there is new information coming out, which has basically hit in the last 6 months. There was a letter in the London Times only last week about the fact that you will get things like testicular cancer, the most common cancer a male can get, and there's a direct causality to cannabis. You will have issues around birth defects. The way I've heard it described by an eminent professor of medicine is the last time there was a state-sanctioned drug, obviously not here, but in the United States, which was like this. It was called thalidomide. So let's make absolutely no mistake. We need to have a better education around this drug, and that's one of the things I'll be trying to bring in.
Yes, thank you. So I support that position, and thank you for the question. Yes, especially the strength of cannabis nowadays, it's incredibly damaging to mental health as well as physical health. So I would advise anybody who thinks it is a low-level drug to think again and look at some of the medical facts behind it. The behaviour is also antisocial, it's intimidatory, it's unnecessary, and again, policing will look to intervene, deal with those individuals and divert them away, not only from the drugs, but from that antisocial behaviour. We are going into schools through our Safer Schools team in order to educate people from a very young age about the damage and the harm that drink and drugs can do, about the law, the legislation, and appropriate behaviour around antisocial behaviour. That's supported as well by other partners like health, who can talk about the health implications of these. So I agree, it's not acceptable. And we will take positive action again when we are confronted with those individuals, because usually there are other issues which are associated with them as well, which we need to deal with.
And can I make one point? One of the things which sometimes occurs is people are reticent about reporting about drug use, illegal drug use, because they're worried that basically they may be found out it is them doing the reporting. There is the option of Crime Stoppers, which is totally anonymous. And that will allow us basically to build the intelligent pictures we need to build in order to address this scourge on our streets.
So another question then from Kerry Wilson. Good evening. Motorbike theft seems to be an issue in the Dorset area at the moment. I understand it is not a top priority compared to these crimes, but these bikes are often used in antisocial behaviour. Would the extra funding help tackle these issues, or would you be willing to work with a self-funded volunteer group who are keen to help with these issues?
Well, my answer would be that the extra funding will help because we'll have more police, more visibility. We'll be able to surge in areas which have a number of these thefts occurring. But I'd also say, and Richard, you may correct me if I'm getting this wrong, but I'd be very prepared to work with any group which is prepared to help drive down crime in Dorset.
Most definitely. We work with a number of volunteer groups. We have our own police volunteers. We welcome any support, advice and guidance, especially when you've got specialist knowledge, because often you have ideas which we haven't considered. So we welcome the engagement and the involvement from the public. In relation to motorbike thefts and antisocial behaviour, we have our road policing units, which has a designated team under No Excuses, which will target offenders specifically. So if it's antisocial, they can seize their vehicles because of no insurance or tax, or just because of dangerous use of that vehicle, and then they will continue to target them. So just because they've been arrested or just because they've had a vehicle, Opdragoon is the operation which, again, I know excuses use to target repeat offenders, to make sure that there is a very clear message that the behaviour won't be tolerated. So yes, we do take it seriously. Again, we are intelligence led, so we need to know where and how these thefts are going to be taken so that we can take all the measures necessary to prevent them, but also to detect and arrest the offenders. So a question then, quite similar then. So Anthony Howes, off-road motorcycle crime is off the radar and victims are often young children whose bikes are stolen. There has been over 130 off-road bikes stolen across Dorset and Hampshire with a value of over £500,000. As you all know, these sorts of crimes are a pathway to, and unfortunately, I can't see any more of the question.
I think because I saw this in the comments, Richard, it's a pathway to other crimes. And the fact that it appears to be organised is Mr. Howell's issue. I'm certain he'll correct me if I've got that wrong because the comments now gone back a bit, but that was what I read earlier. Richard, that's 130 motorbikes. That isn't something I'm aware of. It's not crossed my desk. Would you care to talk to that?
Yeah, so that's put across the two force areas of both Dorset and Hampshire. So I'm just quickly looking here. So theft of motor vehicles and theft from motor vehicles is actually down in our force area, which is a positive. Nonetheless, if you're a victim, it matters incredibly to you. So what I would say is that the rural crime team, one of the aspects they'll be provided is off-road capability. We've talked about the drone and the ability again to track, follow, photograph, and even video offenders in rural areas. That will help hopefully identify those individuals that are riding those off-road in a dangerous manner. In relation to the thefts, theft is and around vehicles and rural crime is very transient. And to reassure you, we work with all of our surrounding forces to share information intelligence. We have a monthly meeting at both a tactical and strategic level to discuss actually which criminals are travelling across borders in order to target, what sort of areas they would target, what sort of property they might seek to steal or take. And we do coordinated actions so that we can arrest them either in their home county or in the county which they are attending to offend. We do have a number of offenders which come cross-border to offend in Dorset, but we also have a number of offenders which travel outside of our county to offend in other counties. So it's essential that as a region we share that information, and that will include Hampshire. So for rural crime, Hampshire is part of our intelligence sharing circle, even though they're part of the South East network. What's actually being done to protect vulnerable children? And that's from Sean Whittle.
Okay, so that's very much asking about what's being done operationally, what you're currently doing. So do you want to talk to that, Richard?
Yeah, I'm more than happy. So we're actually doing a huge amount, and we've got a number of dedicated teams which are looking at exploitation of young people. We're really proud of, we've got a local authority initiative with Children's Social Services called the Harbour Project. The Harbour Project is based in Weymouth, but it covers the whole of the Dorset Council area. It is a specialist team which is health professionals, social workers. We have police embedded within it, speech and language, learning development, psychiatrists, all to identify vulnerable young people, and then to supply and then to provide a wraparound service to support them, whether it be their educational needs, whether it be physical or mental health needs. And we are engaged in that, and that is a project which will continue to develop and grow. Within policing, we have some specialist teams. We have our Kate, which is our child investigation team. We also have a child exploitation team, and we will be in the very near future bringing those back into local policing under a local safeguarding hub. And that local safeguarding hub will specifically have a young person element. So again, we can work with local services to safeguard young people. There's also a exploitation element around drugs for our young people, which we've already discussed. Our neighbourhood enforcement team, which focuses on county lines, looks for those young people that are being exploited for criminal use. And again, we will use the national referral mechanism, which identifies them centrally or nationally, so that all police services and social services are aware of those individuals in case they are trafficked around the country. But more importantly, we're then able to provide that local wraparound service to ensure that we can safeguard them going forward, and monitor and support them.
And from the point of view of a strategic view, in the police and crime plan, I have a thread called Fix the Future. I'm very clear that we need more early intervention. We need more diversion of our young people. We've got great young people in Dorset, but we've got some who do stray into antisocial behaviour and then worse things. And so there will be a meeting held in the first quarter of this year to bottom out what that looks like. Something I'm very clear on, though, is that we have to talk to our children earlier. Primary school head teachers have told me about kids talking, basically behaving like drug lords in the playground at 8. And that is to do with social media, it's to do with mobile phones. So we've got to start talking to kids far earlier than we have been. And I'm very aware that we need to do that. The other thing I'm doing is there is something called Operation Encompass. If we're talking about vulnerable children, these are children who have been witnesses to domestic abuse, and it's a link up between the police and the school the following morning. I'm also clear, and I'm also asked the police to look at this and look at how that can be embedded also in nursery schools, because getting earlier is better, to put our arms around those kids when they're traumatized after what they've seen. So I hope that helps a bit as well.
Question from Mark Frank. Evening, regarding the 105,000 community fund, how can this be accessed for the provisional local young people?
So now that community fund, I'm not certain that is mine, because the one I'm aware of is Operation Relentless. And as I said, I'm doing the Fix the Future bedding down in the next month or so. From that will come a specific fund which can be accessed by groups in order to help with early intervention and diversion. So I can't answer that question because I'm not quite certain which fund you're talking about. But what we'll do is we'll take that back, investigate, and come back to you.
Question from Greg Lawrence. Mr. Sidwick, what has been your favourite moment since becoming the PCC?
Oh, wow. Okay. Crumbs, I'm not certain I've had time to think about that one. I think there was a great feeling of satisfaction at the end of last summer when we'd done the 100-day plan. So let me explain. The summer before, as people will remember, we'd come out of lockdown and we'd had running fights on beaches. We'd had antisocial behaviour, which was even more out of control. And we'd actually declared a major incident in Dorset. And I was determined that we weren't going to have that in well, in the summer just after I'd started. So that was why there was such a push around antisocial behaviour. There was basically the Operation Relentless. There was also, I used to phone on Friday and have a conversation with the chief constable to check that we were sorted for the weekend, and then on Monday to follow up to see what had happened. So I think, yeah, it was after we'd done the 100-day plan, after we got through the summer, and I appreciate what people are saying. It's not perfect. It's not right yet. We've still got quite a few things to do, but we had more people coming to Dorset than we had the summer before, and yet it was better than the summer before overall. So I think it's probably the satisfaction moment when I realized that. Otherwise, it was meeting the police dogs.
Okay then, and I think this is going to be our final question. Can I just say these Facebook Lives are great. Please can the force do more in future, maybe at a more local level with the PCSOs and the police officers?
Well, look, I can only speak for myself, but I think this is one of the ways forward regarding engagement. I'm a great believer in going to meetings. I'm a great believer in talking to people, but this actually collects a lot of people in one place. So I'm intent on doing more of these myself. But I also think it's a good way locally. And Richard, you're going to have a view as to what your people are doing.
Yeah, no, so definitely, and I'm glad that you've found this useful. So all of my neighbourhood inspectors have already completed at least one Facebook Live with their neighbourhood policing teams, where they've invited members of the public. That was essential engagement over the COVID period because we were unable to do face-to-face engagement. Going forward, it is definitely something that we will continue to repeat. If you go on to your local neighbourhood site, they should be advertising events there. If you go onto the local MPT Facebook sites, they will be advertising events there. We also have a neighbourhood engagement document which gets sent out, and it gets sent out via Facebook as well as other online ways, and that provides you a link to a survey so that you can provide feedback. It also lets you know what your local neighbourhood team is doing within your local area and what their priorities are and how you can influence those. So there's a number of ways which you can engage with us. We will continue to do face-to-face events, but this is a very important and essential part of our wider engagement with yourselves, and it's something that we will continue and increase as we go forward. So I'm glad you found it beneficial. Thank you.
Brilliant. Thank you, Richard. And also thank you, Richard, for accompanying me on this Facebook event. I'd like to thank everybody who has looked in and engaged and asked questions. And those which we didn't get to, as I say, we will take them back and we will come back to you. So look, very clearly, there are jobs to be done. I knew that as a candidate. That's why I asked you what you wanted. We've got a plan in place. We'll soon have the chief's plan fully in place, and we'll be able to drive at it. Thank you for your support. Can I ask you that you actually respond to the survey by going to dorsetpolicefunding.uk, as well as saying the things you're saying to me in the chat. Because I've got to land this precept to make certain that we are driving in the way that we need to. I can deliver the plan, and we do drive for Dorset being the safest place. This session we put up on YouTube shortly, so please look out for it. And good night. Best wishes for 2022. Take care, everybody, and stay safe.
Thank you very much, everybody. Stay safe. Thank you.